Well, eNCA's Khayelihle Khumalo is tracking that story for us. He joins us now in studio. Kai, thanks a lot for joining us on Newsnight this evening. It is quite an unfortunate event, one would say the least. And of course, when we're seeing that 149 passengers, including those eight crew members, having passed on, one would say, how far are we in hearing just what is to happen next? And also, when it comes to the search and rescue and recuperating, how far are we when it comes to the airline?
Well, a very heartbreaking incident in Africa. So now the embassies are really working so hard in making sure that they support, because about 33 nationalities were involved. They tragically died in this particular accident. So now they are trying to work so hard with the Ethiopian Airlines to make sure that they get as much support as possible. But other than that, we know that just a short while ago now, there was another press briefing right in Ethiopia by the Ethiopian Airline where they were indicating the fact that, for example, now the investigation will commence to try and delve into the actual cause, precisely. But also, other than that, they will try to get into that all-important black box that will try to answer a myriad of questions that a lot of people are asking, especially because, Faith, this was a very the plane was just about 4 months old.
Yes, wasn't it acquired in November sometime? And
absolutely.
One did not anticipate something like this, of this magnitude, to actually happen to it, because one would expect that if an incident of an accident even happens, the first question that you ask is maintenance of the aircraft. How old was the aircraft? But now to find out that this is a new aircraft, and this also incident happened, I think it was the Prime Minister was speaking about how they were looking at a rapid expansion of Ethiopian Airlines in themselves. So going through that robust restructuring, especially of the state airline.
Especially because when you look at their safety standards as well, they're in compliant with a number of international measures in terms of the aviation sector. But also the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, has just gone into the site. He was actually one of the first people to actually send the condolences here in South Africa as well. Our diplomatic mission is working so hard to make sure that they verify, to make sure that, to see if there were any South African nationals that might have been on board during the course of the accident. But also, more importantly now, there are lots of questions from the side of the families of the victims.
Have those names been released to the families as yet?
So what we know so far is that emergency units have been set up in Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, that is in Nairobi. But of course, there were very bizarre incident leading up to this particular incident. So as they were waiting for their family members to arrive, suddenly there was a message that their flight has been cancelled. So there was no notification that actually there has been
crashed.
Absolutely. So that was a bit of a very bizarre development to that effect. But now the Kenyan authorities, they're working so hard in making sure that the families are afforded privacy so that they just get counselling as well. A lot of them, they're really coming to terms with such a very heart-wrenching situation.
Well, it happened earlier this morning, and one would say that unfortunately, Kaya, it's not the first time that the airline has actually experienced a crash of this kind. Obviously going back to 2010, where a subsequent crash actually happened. So then it goes into issues around precautionary measures, or was this one just a freak accident? It's quite disheartening when it's not the first time, is it? It's one would say that it's better when you say, no, this is the first of its kind that's ever happened to Ethiopian Airlines. But where there's a track record of it having happened previously, it becomes much more difficult to actually come to terms. Number one, with the accident actually happening, but number two, with looking at exactly, could this have been prevented? Was it human error? Was it a freak accident? Was it an issue around the type of aircraft in terms of its, we say it was new, but was it adequate enough to actually have the people? There's so many questions around it, simply because there's even a track record of something like this actually happening in 2010.
So precisely, it's a series of questions. But what we know so far is that there was an indication from the side of the pilots who indicated that they want to turn back to Bole International Airport in Addis Ababa. So subsequent to that, they were not able to do so, unfortunately. So
was that captured on the black box, that the pilot wanted to turn back?
So what we know so far, that was in the audio that was recorded from the tower. So then the airline, the aircraft then just went off the radar. So then they were not able to track further details. But of course, that's going to be part and parcel of the very thorough investigation that now the officials will have to look look into. But we know as well the Boeing, the company that actually manufactured the aircraft, is coming on board. They'll be sending their experts to try and assist Ethiopian Airlines so that they get to the bottom of the actual cause.
One would ask then, just before I let you go, what was it that caused the pilot to want to turn back? Have we been able to determine the reason why he wanted to go back as yet?
At this point, it's very unclear, Faith. So once they have the black box, that's when they will be able to get the actual cause and be able to verify this particular incident. But what we know so far is that there has been an outpouring of condolences. So a lot of people died tragically in this particular plane crash. Diplomats have died, for example.
Some Canadians, people from Spain have died. Some have been reported from China as well. And then when it comes to those other countries, have they been able, I mean, obviously they're trying their best to support those who've lost their loved ones at this particular moment in time, but any formal statements that have been released by the various countries that were affected by this crash?
So what we know so far as well, Faith, is that some countries have actually released the name. For example, when you look at all the Chinese nationals, the Chinese authorities, they've released the names. So they're working so hard as well with their diplomatic mission in Nairobi and also in Ethiopia, because we know that the flight was heading to Nairobi, and it's a very popular flight between the very neighboring.
Like it was saying that it was business as usual when it comes to this morning. It was a regular flight that was scheduled, and there was nothing untoward that would suggest that, you know, there was an issue with this particular flight. But as you're mentioning, there are those pieces of the puzzle that remain unanswered. Number one, as you've mentioned quite rightly, why is it that the pilot wanted to turn back and go back to the airport? Number two, why is it that the messages were sent that the flight was actually cancelled instead of a formal message being sent that the flight had crashed? Those are some of the questions that are unanswered.
So by all means, so we still have a lot of confusing piece of information trying to make sure that it all makes sense. But also more importantly, the Boeing is saying it's monitoring these developments because we know this is not a first incident. When you look back, the Lion Air in Indonesia as well, it was a very same aircraft, and it was relatively
737.
Absolutely. So a lot of questions. So a lot of people are really drawing comparisons as to what exactly is going on. And this is a very popular aircraft. Some of the airlines in South Africa, they've secured this particular aircraft. You know, in terms of so many features, it's very fuel efficient in terms of satisfying the customers. So a lot of questions, really. But
now you've raising questions in my head now, Khaya, as you know, you would understand, and especially as somebody that uses aircrafts as well. I mean, you bring it back home and make this very real for you, is that, number one, is you're saying that this is not the first time that the Boeing 737, and particularly a new one, has actually been involved in an accident. And that says something around the, number one, the PR work that needs to go into, Boeing, but also looking at, could there perhaps be a problem with the new release of Boeings? And could there perhaps be an issue with them? I mean, we've seen incidences where companies have to come in and defend, first of all, but would the Boeing company need to start looking at perhaps maybe an issue, a malfunction in one of their aircrafts?
So already it's a PR nightmare for them. So, but surely they will have to work so hard to try and account in terms of these features. So experts are saying that oftentimes, so when you have an aircraft, from time to time, there'll be hiccups, especially if it's a new range. So it's something that is not abnormal. But I mean, given all these incidents that we've seen where a number of fatalities have been recorded, surely Boeing will have to account from their side as to what their technical experts are saying. But of course, all of this is still under the realm of speculation. The officials are working so hard to make sure that they bring comfort to those who have lost their loved ones, but also making sure that they strike that balancing act of investigating, but also trying to answer a number of serious questions.
Well, Kai, we're going to leave our conversation there, but thanks for joining us this evening, just really shedding some light in terms of what is happening, after that accident or the plane crash of Ethiopian Airlines there. Now,